started with the idea of knowing that I needed the kids to know what theme is and how it differentiates from motif. And then we had this idea that we were going to have them look at several motifs that Harper Lee develops in the novel, and then do this research project or essay at the end. And so I had 5 motifs that I started with: race, class, gender, prejudice, loss of innocence, and justice. No, 6. And so I looked for quotes that helped to support those particular motifs. I looked for images, and then Sean O'Connor did a write-around before we even started, connecting to some of those ideas to truth, justice, oppression, marginalization. And so I pulled some of his documents, but I added some that went for the race, class, gender sides. And I got the idea for a write-around from seeing you guys do it with the IB kids, and that was fun. And very thoughtful. So last week, Thursday, in the classroom, there was 8 stations, and each station had 3 or 4 documents. That took a little bit of time because I had to think about what would be the big concept of a page myself, but not make it too obvious for them. Yeah. And so I spent some time thinking about what ideas go with race, what ideas go with gender, put them on the butcher paper, and then each class had 20 minutes to walk around with their pen silently. They could go to whatever station they wanted, and they just had to write. They could write in response to the document, they could write in response to each other, and they were very, very thoughtful. And we didn't finish. I idealistically was thinking I could do it all in one day, but it takes a while because they're thinking. And then the second half is they sit down at a station, and then they do a strategy called See, Think, Wonder. And I got that from Dr. Glenn, where they have to kind of connect the common threads between what's on their documents and think about the big takeaways. And since I knew that I wanted them to think about motif, I also said put it into one word. So what are the big concepts, and then distill it all the way down into one word, in my mind knowing that that one word would be motif. And a lot of the kids picked up on that. They already were calling their one word motif. Like up there it says motif prejudice, because they already, like we talked about motif once or twice last semester, and they already kind of, they're sharp.
Yeah.
Like,
so they were connecting the dots from that prior knowledge.
Yes.
Cool.
And so then the second half would be to talk about how authors use motifs to build into themes. And so that was the end, kind of the little worksheet where they had to do from their motif, where do we see it, and what's the theme built out of it. So that was that.
Well, your classes were amazing today, and I know the 3 that I got to really sit in and watch and listen, I was just so impressed by the depth of thought and how engaged they were. And it really struck me today, like I've noticed this with other classes and us doing it too, but it really impressed me today that as your kids were doing that share out piece, which like you said, you really need the second day or an extended like block period. But it was really interesting as they were building on each other's ideas and topics, and just to kind of, and as they were taking notes on each other's commentary, just kind of that collective, collaborative knowledge building. I think that sharing out piece is so important because it just really, puts the exclamation point or additional question marks at the end of that written conversation. And I know
for me too,
yeah,
because they brought up things and they built on each other in ways that I hadn't thought about. And I think that, like you said, for them to share out and hear each other raises everybody to the same high level. Like kids who may not have picked up on some things, unless they're just sleeping, are going to get raised up.
It seemed like everybody really had their little antenna up today and was interested. I was just wondering if very quickly, because I know you have a club meeting, if you and I were talking earlier today about the silent aspect when you first began the ride around, and I know Jen and I have just been so fascinated, by that piece of the activity. I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit about your thoughts about the importance of that kind of quiet, sustained writing time that kind of kicks off the initial part of the ride around.
So initially they'll be resistant to it because they're kind of uncomfortable with silence. And so there might even be some immaturity. Like I had some comments written down that were much less than useful, but you kind of just, you push them, and then the more thoughtful ones are writing good stuff, and that kind of pushes the direction to the serious and to the thoughtful. But we were talking about, I liked, they get more insightful when they have to be quiet versus when they just can talk. And I was very surprised by the insights that came on the paper as opposed to what might have just come out of their mouth if they had not had to be quiet first.
I think
I thought that part was powerful.
I agree, and I think it's almost like that quiet part is almost sort of I don't know if rehearsal is quite the word I'm looking for, but it's kind of that incubation time where they can really kind of think about the ideas, as opposed to sometimes if you're just sitting and chatting initially, you might not be as intentional or deliberate in your thinking, or you might just get caught up in the verbal aspect.
Yeah. I think incubation is a good word for it. And I think something about having it visual too, like if they're just listening to people, a lot of them are way more visual than auditory. And so if they were just listening, they might not catch everything. Whereas if they're reading it and having to respond in writing, that forces them to slow down a little bit and pulls the good stuff out.
Yeah, and I noticed too, like you, as I was looking around today and documenting some of their work, you definitely could see the body of ideas. The majority were really on target and related, and I just thought they made so many interesting connections to other things they knew. It was just joyful, really, to have that chance to listen to them. So I'm excited to
It was
see what
joyful
you guys
for
do
me
next.
too. Like I'm very pleased with them. They're game. They're thoughtful. They're willing to get in it. And I am tough on them, but they're not like scared of that, and I like that.
They've risen to the occasion. Well, we appreciate you coming and using the
you.
Learning Studio today and letting us learn from you and your students. And
This is an awesome space. This is also
Yeah.
way better than I could have gotten in the classroom.
yeah, it's very interesting. As you know, that's something Jen and I are thinking a lot about, how the learning space impacts your instruction, and so we're excited that you all were able to come today, and we're excited to be working with you in a few weeks on the research project. So thank you for being so generous and sharing your time and reflections. All right, thank you.
Thank you.